This novel is a dark and intricate retelling of The Wizard of Oz, focusing on the origins and life of Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West. Book 1, Munchkinlanders. Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. The first section of Wicked, titled Munchkinlanders, serves as an introduction to Elphaba's origins, exploring her birth, early childhood, and the societal forces that shape her identity. Unlike the original Wizard of Oz story, where the Wicked Witch of the West appears fully formed as an antagonist, Maguire's novel delves deep into the character's background, humanizing her and questioning the nature of good and evil. This section sets the tone for the book's exploration of themes such as prejudice, power, destiny, and the struggle between personal agency and societal expectations. Chapter summaries and key themes. The root of evil. The novel opens in the land of Munchkinland, where Melina Throp, a restless and somewhat disillusioned woman from a noble family, is introduced. She is married to Frex, a devoutly religious and zealous unionist minister. Their relationship is strained as Frex is more devoted to his faith and missionary work than to his wife. One night, while Frex is away preaching to local villagers, Melina is visited by a mysterious traveller. Though it is never explicitly confirmed, it is heavily implied that she is either seduced or assaulted by this stranger. Shortly after this encounter, she becomes pregnant with a child whose father may or may not be her husband. This ambiguity regarding Elphaba's parentage immediately introduces one of the book's key questions. Is evil inherited, or is it shaped by experience?
Themes introduced.
Religious zeal versus secular life. Frex represents strict religious devotion, while Melina symbolises worldly pleasure and frustration with societal expectations. Moral ambiguity. Even in the first chapter, Maguire resists clear definitions of good and evil, showing flawed, complex characters instead of archetypes. Fate versus choice. The circumstances of Elphaba's conception raise questions about destiny. Is she doomed to be an outsider from birth? The Clock of the Taggin, a travelling show called The Clock of the Time Dragon, arrives in Munchkinland. This mechanical puppet show, run by a mysterious figure named the Dwarf, acts as a subversive and prophetic entity, mocking religious institutions and exposing the hypocrisy of powerful figures. The villagers, stirred by the show, turn on Frex, blaming him for their hardships. At the same time, Melina goes into labour, giving birth to a baby girl, Elphaba, who shocks everyone with her green skin and sharp teeth. The child's unnatural appearance terrifies the midwives and others present, leading to immediate speculation that she is cursed or demonic. Symbolism of the Clock of the Time Dragon. It represents fate, chaos, and the unravelling of accepted truths. It foreshadows Elphaba's future struggles against authority and conventional morality. It is an early example of how truth is manipulated through performance, storytelling, and spectacle. Introduction of Elphaba. From birth, Elphaba is viewed as an aberration, a curse upon her family. Her appearance immediately marks her as different, reinforcing themes of alienation and prejudice. The birth of a witch. Elphaba's infancy is difficult for Melina, who struggles to bond with her daughter. The baby appears unusually intelligent but also wild, with a strong aversion to water which burns her skin, and a fierce, almost animalistic nature. Despite Frex's initial horror at Elphaba's appearance, he grows to believe that she is not evil, but rather a test of faith. Themes and character development. Parental expectations and rejection. Both Melina and Frex struggle to understand their daughter, with Melina viewing her as a burden and Frex seeing her as a spiritual challenge. Water as a weakness. This detail becomes significant throughout the novel, reinforcing her otherness and eventually playing a crucial role in her fate. 4. Maladies and remedies. As Elphaba grows, her differences become even more apparent. She does not behave like other children, and her parents become desperate for a solution. In their attempt to cure her, they call in Nanny, a no-nonsense woman who has served Melina's family for years. Nanny, though unconventional, provides a stabilising presence in Elphaba's chaotic childhood.
Nanny's role.
She is one of the few characters who treats Elphaba with care, though she, too, acknowledges her strangeness. She represents a voice of reason amid Frex's religious fervour and Melena's detachment. This chapter also introduces the idea that Elphaba may have magical abilities, though they are not fully understood yet. 5. The Quadling Glassblower. Frex takes Elphaba on a journey to visit a quadling man named Turtleheart, a glassblower from a marginalised ethnic group. Unlike others, Turtleheart does not recoil at Elphaba's appearance, treating her with kindness and fascination. His presence in their home disrupts the fragile balance of Melena and Frex's marriage. Significance of Turtleheart. He is a quadling, an oppressed racial group in Oz, mirroring Elphaba's status as an outsider. He introduces the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West. This section follows Elphaba as she leaves her isolated childhood in Munchkinland and enters the more sophisticated world of Shiz University in Gillikin. Here she meets key figures who will shape her future, including Galinda, later Glinda, Bock and Madame Morrible. The narrative explores themes of friendship, power, social hierarchy, and the emergence of political unrest in Oz. Elphaba arrives at Shiz University, a prestigious institution where she has been sent to study. She is assigned a roommate, Galinda, a privileged and vain young woman from a noble Gillikinese family. The two are immediately at odds. Galinda is superficial and self-absorbed, while Elphaba is serious and socially awkward. Their relationship is strained at first, but as time passes, they develop a complex friendship. At Shiz, Elphaba also befriends Bock, a Munchkinlander who has long admired Galinda but finds himself drawn to Elphaba's intelligence. Another key figure is Dr. Dillamond, a goat professor and one of the few talking animals at the university. Through him, Elphaba becomes aware of the growing discrimination against sentient animals in Oz. The wizard's government is enacting laws that strip animals of their rights, forcing them into silence and servitude. Dr. Dillamond's research into the origins of animals and their connection to humans makes him a target. His sudden and suspicious murder deeply affects Elphaba, fueling her distrust of authority and planting the seeds of her activism. She begins to question the wizard's rule and the way power is wielded in Oz. Madame Morrible, the headmistress of Shiz, takes an interest in Elphaba, recognizing her potential. She invites Elphaba, Galinda, and another student, Nessaros, Elphaba's younger sister, born without arms and deeply religious, to a private meeting, suggesting that they train under her to become key figures in the wizard's administration. Though Galinda initially accepts the offer eagerly, Elphaba is suspicious of Morrible's manipulations. After Dillamond's death, Elphaba decides to act. She and a friend attempt to rescue an animal being experimented on in a laboratory, but their plan fails. The consequences of this failure and the realization that the wizard's government is far more oppressive than she had imagined push Elphaba to make a life-changing decision. She must go to the Emerald City and confront the wizard himself. The book ends with Elphaba leaving Shiz, determined but uncertain about what lies ahead. Her journey toward rebellion has begun. Book 4, In the Vincus, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. This section follows Elphaba's years of self-imposed exile in the Vincus, a remote and rugged region of Oz. Emotionally shattered by the events in the Emerald City, she withdraws from society, struggling with guilt, loss, and the question of whether she has any real power to change the world. Elphaba seeks refuge at Kamoko, a crumbling castle in the Vincus. The estate belongs to Fiero's family, the ruling dynasty of the region. After his presumed death, Elphaba feels a sense of responsibility toward his wife, Sarima, and their children. She arrives at the castle, hoping for some form of redemption, but instead finds herself trapped in an uneasy existence. Sarima, unaware of the full truth behind Fiero's disappearance, accepts Elphaba as a guest, but refuses to speak of the past. This unspoken rule frustrates Elphaba, who desperately seeks absolution. Over time, she forms a bond with Sarima's children, especially Norb, the eldest boy. However, her presence at Kiamako remains uneasy. She is both an intruder and a caretaker of a fractured household. During her isolation, Elphaba also becomes fascinated by her mother's old grimoire, a mysterious book of magic written in an indecipherable language. Though she has always resisted being labelled as a witch, she begins experimenting with spells, hoping to uncover its secrets. However, her powers remain inconsistent and unreliable, further fueling her frustration. Meanwhile, political tensions in Oz continue to rise. The wizard's forces encroach upon the Vincus, and Elphaba's sister, Nesseros, has taken control of Munchkinland, ruling as the devout and oppressive Wicked Witch of the East. Elphaba briefly reunites with Nesseros, but finds they have grown too different. Nesseros justifies her authoritarian rule as divinely ordained, while Elphaba sees it as another form of tyranny. Elphaba's fragile existence at Kiamoko is shattered when soldiers of the wizard arrive, taking Sarima and her children captive. Elphaba, away at the time, returns to find the castle abandoned and her surrogate family gone, likely executed. This final loss cements her belief that she is cursed and powerless to protect those she loves. With nothing left, Elphaba fully embraces her identity as the Wicked Witch of the West. She remains at Kiamoko, withdrawing further into bitterness and despair, allowing the world to shape her into the feared legend she will soon become. This book solidifies Elphaba's final descent into isolation, setting the stage for her fateful encounter with Dorothy in the next section. Book 4, In the Vincus, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. This section of Wicked follows Elphaba's self-imposed exile in the Vincus, a remote and untamed region of Oz. Emotionally devastated by the loss of Fiyero and her failure to challenge the wizard's rule, she retreats into isolation, seeking refuge at Kiamoko, a fortress belonging to Fiyero's family. However, rather than finding peace, she becomes entangled in new struggles involving political turmoil, personal grief, and the search for meaning in her life.
Elphaba at Kiamoko.
Elphaba arrives at Kiamoko, a crumbling castle in the cold and barren landscape of the Vincus. The estate belongs to the ruling dynasty of the area, the family of Fiyero, her former lover. Still haunted by guilt over his presumed death at the hands of the wizard's secret police, she hopes to find redemption by caring for Fiyero's wife, Sarima, and their children. However, Sarima does not want to speak of the past. Though she allows Elphaba to stay, she refuses to discuss Fiyero's fate, insisting that it is best left forgotten. This frustrates Elphaba, who is tormented by the need to confess her role in Fiyero's downfall. Instead, she settles into an uneasy existence, helping raise Sarima's children while struggling with a sense of displacement. During this time, she also begins studying the Grimoire, an ancient and mysterious book of magic that once belonged to her mother. The book is written in a cryptic language she can barely understand, but she obsessively tries to decipher its secrets, hoping it will provide answers about her power or her purpose. The political situation in Oz. Beyond the walls of Kiamoko, Oz is growing more unstable. The wizard's rule has become increasingly tyrannical, and resistance movements are stirring. Meanwhile, Elphaba's sister, Nesseros, has taken control of Munchkinland, ruling with religious fanaticism. Declaring herself the rightful leader, Nesseros governs harshly, enforcing strict moral laws and punishing dissenters. Elphaba briefly reunites with Nesseros, hoping to rekindle their bond, but she quickly realizes that they have grown too different. Nesseros embraces power as a divine right, seeing herself as chosen by the unnamed god, while Elphaba remains skeptical of all authority. The two sisters clash, and Elphaba ultimately leaves, feeling more alone than ever.
Loss and betrayal.
Back at Kiamoko, Elphaba's fragile sense of belonging is shattered when the wizard's forces arrive. Sarima and her children are taken captive, and Elphaba, who was away at the time, returns to find the castle empty. She later learns that they were likely executed, though their fates remain uncertain. This final loss sends Elphaba into complete despair. Having failed to save Fiyero, Sarima, or their children, she becomes convinced that she is cursed, doomed to bring suffering to those she cares about. In her grief, she isolates herself further, withdrawing from the world and allowing the legend of the Wicked Witch of the West to solidify around her. By the end of this section, Elphaba is no longer trying to fight fate. She has become the figure that history will remember as the Wicked Witch. She remains at Kiamoko, growing bitter and resigned, waiting for whatever destiny has in store for her. This book marks the final step in Elphaba's transformation, setting the stage for her fateful encounter with Dorothy Gale in the final section of the novel. Book 5, The Murder and Its Afterlife, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. The final section of Wicked brings Elphaba's story to its tragic conclusion, merging her personal journey with the familiar events of the wonderful Wizard of Oz. At Kiamo-ko, Elphaba's isolated existence is interrupted by the arrival of Dorothy Gale, setting into motion the final chapter of her life. As misunderstandings, fate, and politics collide, Elphaba meets her downfall, not through malice or wickedness, but as the inevitable end of her long, painful struggle.
Dorothy's arrival
And the silver ruby slippers. Dorothy, a young girl from Kansas, accidentally kills Nessarose when a house lands in Munchkinland. Unaware of the political implications, Dorothy inherits Nessarose's enchanted silver shoes, which later become ruby slippers in the film adaptation. This act places Dorothy at the center of Oz's growing tensions, as many, including Elphaba, view the shoes as a powerful symbol of legitimacy and control over Munchkinland. Elphaba, hearing of her sister's death, is devastated. Though she and Nessarose had grown apart, Nessarose was her last remaining family. When Dorothy, now traveling through Oz, arrives at Kiamo-ko seeking forgiveness for Nessarose's death, Elphaba becomes fixated on reclaiming the silver shoes. She believes they rightfully belong to her as Nessarose's heir. However, Dorothy, naive and frightened, refuses to give them up. This misunderstanding solidifies Elphaba's reputation as the Wicked Witch of the West, despite her more complex and tragic motivations. The final collapse. By this point, Elphaba has lost nearly everything: her parents, her sister, her lover, and the family she tried to protect. Even her attempts to harness magic through the grimoire have largely failed, deepening her sense of powerlessness. She makes one final attempt to prove her worth by summoning a spell, but it goes wrong, reinforcing her belief that she is cursed. Realizing that she has nothing left, Elphaba finally resigns herself to fate. She allows her legend as the Wicked Witch to take hold, knowing that history will paint her as a villain.
The iconic death. Dorothy,
urged by others to protect herself, throws a bucket of water on Elphaba. To Dorothy's shock, Elphaba melts instantly, fulfilling the prophecy that water is her ultimate weakness. However, her death is not a moment of triumph, but a tragic accident. Dorothy never meant to kill her, and Elphaba's life ends in an anticlimactic and senseless way, highlighting the randomness of fate. Following her death, Elphaba's belongings are plundered by those seeking power, and the legend of the Wicked Witch is solidified in Oz's history. The wizard's rule remains intact, and much of Elphaba's fight is ultimately in vain.
the meaning of the afterlife.
Elphaba's afterlife exists not in a literal sense, but in the way her legacy is shaped after her death. She is remembered not for her intelligence, suffering, or rebellion, but as the monstrous wicked witch who opposed Dorothy and the wizard. The novel closes on an ambiguous note. Was Elphaba ever truly wicked, or was she simply a victim of fate, misunderstood by history? Gregory Maguire leaves readers with the realization that heroes and villains are often shaped by those who tell the story, not by the truth of their lives. Thus, Wicked ends as a tragedy. Elphaba is gone, her dreams unrealized, and her story forever twisted by the myths and legends of Oz.